Massive Ukrainian counterattacks along the Pokrovsk front line forced Russian forces to shift from offense to defense, creating a critical window for Ukrainian troops to rotate forces and deliver vital supplies to defenders in Pokrovsk. Here, Ukrainian units launched a massive wave of coordinated counterattacks along the entire Pokrovsk front line to block and cut off the Russian pincer above Mirnohrad. As the Russians were forced to quickly react to the unfolding developments, the Ukrainian command ordered to execute the most important move of the entire Pokrovsk operation. Ukrainian units counterattacked near Dobropilya, combining air power, tanks, and precision-guided munitions in a synchronized strike that put Russian positions in great danger. The operation began when aerial reconnaissance detected Russian drone operators setting up in the territory of a local mine east of Rodinsky. Within minutes, the coordinates were transmitted, and a Ukrainian Su-27 delivered a precise strike with a GBU-62 JDAM bomb, annihilating the launch site. Moments later, Ukrainian surveillance drones spotted Russian troops attempting to fortify a building on the outskirts of Rodinsky. Another airstrike followed, again using JDAM bomb, wiping out the infiltrators and several Russian officers who had been directing operations in that area. Later, Ukrainian drones identified fresh groups of Russian soldiers attempting to regroup in another building inside Rodinsky, but a Ukrainian tank opened fire on one structure, clearing it of enemy forces. Inside an industrial complex nearby, more Russians were spotted, so Ukrainian jets launched JDAMs again, with the first one missing slightly due to Russian electronic warfare interference, while the second flattened the site successfully. These airstrikes were part of a carefully planned prelude to the main ground counterattack aimed at securing Mirnohrad's northern flank and pushing Russian forces further away from encircling it. Ukrainian forces used the momentum of the airstrikes and ground units to simulate a massive assault launched from all sides, catching the attention of the Russian surveillance and forcing them to switch focus from offense to defense. The enemy abandoned temporarily attempts to reach the encircled units and instead focused on holding the line. Later, it became evident that the Ukrainian counterattack was a well-orchestrated distraction. While the Russian command concentrated all attention on Dobropilya, convinced that the northern flank was the main target, Ukrainian commanders quietly executed a partial rotation of forces in Mirnohrad. This operation enabled the secure evacuation of wounded personnel and the delivery of vital supplies and ammunition to those still defending the town. It was a textbook deception maneuver. Create pressure on one sector, force the enemy to divert reserves, and use the gained window to reinforce or extract troops from another direction. This first stage of the plan was completed with remarkable coordination. Ukrainian troops conducted the rotation and partial withdrawal from the semi-encircled town with no losses. The counterattack to the north drew away Russian reconnaissance assets, allowing evacuation convoys to move through safely under electronic countermeasures. Part of the soldiers were safely extracted behind the front lines, while the remaining defenders in Mirnohrad resupplied and prepared to hold the new line. At the same time, this was not the only distraction for the Russians. While the Dobropilya counterattack tied down their reserves, they were also forced to maintain focus on Pokrovsk, where Ukrainian forces continue to hold the enemy south of the railway line by constant clearing operations against Russian infiltrators. This persistent defense, the main objective of Ukraine's Pokrovsk operation, is working precisely as General Syrskyi planned. The ability to withdraw, rotate, and evacuate forces from Mirnohrad would have been impossible if Pokrovsk had fallen, or if Russian units had broken through north of the railway. Ukrainian troops are thus not only defending two towns, but coordinating between them in a way that keeps both strategically viable and linked through controlled logistics corridors. Overall, the latest events around Dobropilya, Pokrovsk, and Mirnohrad reveal a multi-layered Ukrainian strategy to contain the Russian advance, transform Mirnohrad into a fortress, and force Russia into another slow, attritional fight that costs thousands of lives for minimal territorial gain. The successful Dobropilya counterattack has already bought Ukraine precious time, destabilized Russian planning, and improved the security of the northern approaches. If Ukraine continues to hold the railway in Pokrovsk and keeps Mirnohrad supplied, the Russians will face months of bloody stalemate, one that Ukraine will use to strengthen its new defensive lines behind the embattled town.
Yeah.
And a Ukrainian drone team said this week that it attacked Russian vehicles with small quadcopters that flew over 37 miles, marking some of the longest-range strikes in the war with such drones. The Ivan Franko Group, a special forces drone unit under Ukraine's security service, wrote on Monday that it had conducted the strikes with 8-inch and 10-inch FPV drones that crossed over 60 kilometers under their own power. These are first-person view drones that use 8-inch or 10-inch propellers to fly, and are the typical hobby quadcopters that have proliferated on Ukraine's battlefield. 60 kilometers, or roughly 37 miles, is far beyond the usual range of an FPV drone, which can often reliably fly only up to 12 miles or so. On Thursday, the Ivan Franko Group posted a video montage of the strikes, which appears to show at least 4 different quadcopters cruising high above roads before directly flying into trucks and other ground vehicles. The group said all of the strikes occurred near the Donetsk airport. Business Insider was able to independently verify the location of 2 strikes that occurred on a highway near the ruined village of Pisky, which is about 30 miles from Ukrainian lines. However, it's unclear from the videos when they were filmed. The Ivan Franko Group said the drones used in the strike were provided by the Sternenko Foundation, a prominent group of volunteers who raise funds from the public to buy drones for Ukrainian troops. Alexander Scarlett, the foundation's director, told Business Insider that the drones in the clips were equipped with higher capacity batteries and more powerful video transmitters to extend their flight range. They also used a relay system, he said. These are a relatively new development on the battlefield, where a drone bounces its signal off another drone to extend its range to the pilot. Scarlett said each drone costs roughly $475 to $500, but can be sold for up to $600 if equipped with thermal cameras. These drones are not available to everyone, but production is scaling up every month, Scarlett said. Previously, only a few units were flying over 40 kilometers. Now, there are already several dozen units doing so, he added. Consistent FPV drone strikes at such a range would show how the war is pushing the limits of the humble hobby drone, which is now inspiring militaries around the world to ramp up their own uncrewed aerial system arsenals. This summer, a drone unit in Zaporizhia, known as the Ronins, told Business Insider that it flew quadcopters up to 34 miles to attack Russian air defense systems, a range that was almost unheard of among drone units. Earlier this month, Ukrainian soldiers told Business Insider's Jake Epstein that both Kyiv's and Moscow's forces were starting to deploy more expensive medium-range drones, previously reserved for reconnaissance, to conduct strikes up to 125 miles from the front line.